In the bustling city of Los Angeles, the criminal underground is growing day by day, and as a new boss arrives, how will the finest SWAT deal with the upcoming threat? The movie opens with Los Angeles Police Department officers engaged in a violent shootout with 4 masked bank robbers who have held up a bank with hostages. The SWAT team arrives at the area shortly after, and Jim and Brian drop from a helicopter on the bank roof and make their way down to the storage room. Meanwhile, the other SWAT members take out the robbers outside the bank, leaving only 2 robbers alive. The 2 remaining robbers inside then start to panic and grab hostages and threaten to kill them. The police then start negotiating with them and asking them what they went to. As the negotiator deals with the robbers, SWAT leader Lieutenant Greg orders for his team inside the bank to hold and stay where they are. But Brain ignores the order and drops into the storeroom anyway. Jim wants to follow his boss's orders, but since his partner is moving, he follows him. Brian then sneaks into the back of the main lobby and gets in position to shoot down the robbers. One of the hostage takers, getting more and more nervous, grabs a woman, puts a pistol to her head, and prepares to kill her. The police are still negotiating, but Brian sees the threat and shoots the robber down through the woman's shoulder, wounding her in the process, but effectively killing the robber. The last robber is then taken out by Jim, and everyone is saved. Back at the precinct, Captain Thomas is furious at Jim and Brian for not following orders he is especially mad since the hostage they wounded is now suing the LAPD for negligence. They try to explain to him the situation, but Thomas decides to remove them from SWAT. Lieutenant Greg then intervenes and asks that they should remain in the division so they can eventually get a chance to get their jobs back. Thomas agrees and relegates them to cage duty, which means they will be working in the storage room and give guns to other officers. Brian is insulted and tells Thomas off, making it worse for himself. He then storms off in anger. Thomas then has a private conversation with Jim where he offers him a chance to get back on the team right away if Jim agrees to rat out Brian for the incident. Few minutes after Jim goes to the locker room and finds Brian is packing his bag as he has decided to quit, he and Jim then get into an argument when Jim reveals he agrees with Thomas that Brian was reckless out there and refuses to follow his partner in quitting. Brian then assumes Jim ratted him out and shoves Jim onto a mirror before leaving. 6 months later, Jim is still working in the gun cage, performing menial tasks for other police officers, and still waiting for a chance to get back on the field. One day, Sergeant Daniel, nicknamed Hondo, that is what they all call him, use that, comes to the precinct and asks Jim to fix his customized rifle. Hondo later meets with Greg to discuss forming a new SWAT team for him to command. Greg offers Hondo 2 of his own officers, TJ and Michael. Hondo accepts them and decides to pick out 3 more candidates from the personnel files. Later that day, Jim returns home to find his friend trying to move out of their apartment before he comes back. She tells him things between them are not good anymore, and that he hasn't been the same since he was taken off the SWAT team. She then tries to kiss him one last time, but he refuses and lets her leave without arguing. The next day, Hondo comes back to take his gun and is impressed by Jim's work. Hondo then goes to the firing range to test his new recruit TJ. TJ is a very skilled shooter, and he manages to beat out Hondo, but Hondo notices Jim practicing alone and hitting his shots, so he makes TJ compete with Jim. They both then run through the course and shoot down their target, but Jim manages to finish seconds before TJ impresses Hondo more. Meanwhile, a French mobster named Alex Montel arrives in Los Angeles. He meets up with his uncle who runs the mob in LA. He spends the night drinking with his uncle, and he then reveals that he has taken the family business from his father. His uncle thinks he is kidding, but Alex confronts him about stealing money from his family and then slits his uncle's throat. He then warns everyone else there that he won't be as lenient as his father and leaves. He takes his uncle's car to drive back to his hotel, but he gets stopped by a police officer for having a broken taillight. The police officer then checks the license plate and informs Alex that a warrant has been out for the owner of the car, and since he is driving it, he gets arrested until he is cleared. The next day, Hondo asks Jim to drive him around as he looks for recruits around the city. They first decide to investigate an officer named Deke, who they find in the middle of chasing a suspect. Hondo and Jim then cut off the suspect and help Deke out. Hondo then asks Deke to join him, which Deke immediately accepts. They then visit another candidate who makes a bad first impression on Hondo by being a vegetarian and being too polite and too much of a rule follower, which Hondo's didn't like. They then move on to an officer named Chris Sanchez, a woman who had applied and qualified several times for SWAT but keeps getting turned down. Chris always gets into a fight with criminals, which is why she was not accepted, but Hondo likes that, so he lets her in the team too. Jim and Hondo then return to the precinct, and Hondo asks Jim to join the team as well. Jim is hesitant at first, knowing that Thomas is very unlikely to approve him, but Hondo tells him he can handle Thomas. Hondo then meets with Thomas, and Thomas rejects both Chris and Jim right away, but Hondo refuses to back down and bargains with him by saying if the team fails the test, then he can be fired. Thomas takes the deal. Training begins shortly after, and the new squad members get to know each other, and it's revealed that Jim's girlfriend, who dumped him earlier, was actually Michael's sister. Michael thinks Jim did something wrong, so there is some tension between them. But even with the team not vibing with each other, they do great on the practice tests. Then the real test comes, and the team are thrown into a simulated hostage situation set up by Thomas. The team will have to infiltrate an airplane taken over by terrorists, played by fellow officers armed with paintball guns. They will have to take back control of the aircraft and take out all 6 hijackers within 8 minutes. The team looks at the plane's blueprint and discusses how to enter it. Jim then notices that there is a hidden entry point to the plane that no one will expect, so they decide to go with his plan. The team then sneak onto the plane and take out all 6 hijackers, although TJ takes a hit that would have been fatal had it been real. Despite this, the new team sets a new course record, much to Thomas's annoyance. That night, the group celebrates at Deke's father's restaurant, and after a few hours of eating and drinking, most of the group heads home except for Chris and Jim, who want to keep having fun. Jim takes Chris to his favorite bar, but they run into Brian. The two have a passive-aggressive exchange until Brian decides to leave angrily, and he breaks a framed photo of the two of them that was hung in the bar. Later that night, Jim tries to make a pass at Chris, but she turns him down, but then invites him to her daughter's birthday party tomorrow. The next day, Jim arrives at Chris's home for the birthday party, and everyone has fun, but the party gets interrupted by a call from the police. They are told a man has barricaded himself in his house and is randomly firing a shotgun out the window. The man also claims to have wired all the entrances with explosives, which no one believes, but Greg refuses to take that chance. Jim then brings out his custom-made wall breaker, which they use to tear down the back wall of the house, and they take down the guy without anyone getting hurt. Back in LA prison, we see Alex is still in custody because his uncle hasn't been found, and his identity is also not confirmed since he uses a fake identity to get into the country. He asks his lawyer to bribe the police, but he is told to wait until they get an opportunity. A few days later, Alex is in a prison bus to be transferred into another location, but in the sheriff's department, an officer finally finds out Alex's true identity. Greg is then notified, and since Alex is a criminal, wanted in multiple countries, including the United States, he asks Hondo's unit to intercept and escort the prison bus carrying Alex. But Alex's gang has also learned about the transfer, and 2 of Alex's men disguise themselves as police officers and use a stolen police car to pull the bus over. They then take out the officers inside and free Alex, but as they're about to drive off, Hondo's team arrives and a shootout breaks out. The shootout is quick, but at the end, both the gang members are killed and Alex is captured. The media also gets the news about Alex and they blast him on TV, and as he is being led to a holding cell, he faces a TV camera and offers $100 million as a reward for anyone who can break him out of jail. This attracts the attention of every gang in Los Angeles and alerts Hondo's team of an upcoming danger if they don't get rid of him fast. Thomas decides to send Alex to a maximum prison, so Hondo's team takes Alex to the roof so he can get picked up by a helicopter. The helicopter arrives shortly after, but before it can land, it is shot down by Brian, who is aiming with a sniper from another building. The team take Alex back inside and form a new plan. They put a fake Alex on an escort car, and when gangs go to attack, that they take the real Alex down an underground road and put him in a different car. Hondo's plan runs smoothly up until halfway through the second checkpoint, where TJ stops the car and points his gun at his own team. He has decided to take Alex's offer, but doesn't want to hurt his teammates, so he tells them to not move. Jim and Michael then attempt to reason with him, but Brian arrives out of nowhere and shoots Michael. They then take Alex and run into the train station. Michael is then taken to a hospital. Then Hondo and Jim decide to chase Brian's group into the train station, while Deke and Chris drive to the next station. Both teams then later meet in the middle of the tunnel. As Brian and Alex haven't passed through the next station, they soon find the train abandoned midway through the tunnel, with Brian and his men all gone. The driver points them to a sewage tunnel, and the team jumps in and starts looking for them. Meanwhile, Thomas finds out about TJ's betrayal and Brian's involvement, and suspects the whole team might be part of the operation to free Alex. He then tries to contact Hondo, but there is no reception in the tunnel, so he gets no response, which adds to his suspicion. Hondo and his team track down Brian and his men, but Brian slows them down by setting up a bomb trap. Jim saves Deke from triggering the trap and disables the bomb. He then uses the bomb and uses it to blow up a gate that had been shut off. As they get out of the tunnel, connection is back, and Hondo explains what happened to Thomas and asks him to send vehicles to pick them up. But Thomas doesn't trust Hondo anymore, so he orders him and his team down and refuses to go pick them up. Hondo ignores the order, and he and his team steal a car from a civilian and continue their chase. As they drive, Chris notices a low-flying jet over the city. Knowing all units are at the airport, they deduce that the jet must be Brian's and Alex's. Hondo and his then follow the jet, which is actually landing on a civilian bridge rather than at the airport. Hondo then drives the car faster and crashes through the roadblock. At the same time, the plane lands at the bridge and picks up Brian and Alex, but before it can take off, Hondo crashes the car onto the wings of the plane and stops it from flying. A gun battle starts between Hondo's and Brian's team, and Chris gets hit on the shoulder, but the SWAT team is much more capable, so they take out Brian's team. Alex then tries to run away, but he gets easily captured by Deke. Hondo then confronts an injured TJ inside the plane. TJ then asks if Michelle is okay, and Hondo confirms that he is recovering in the hospital. TJ then shoots himself on the head, as he prefers death over going to prison. Meanwhile, Brian jumps into the train station, so Jim follows him in there, and they get into a fist fight. The fight is close, but as they try to choke each other on the train track, a train comes rolling down, and Jim manages to push Brian's head into the train, and he gets crushed. Thomas then arrives shortly after and congratulates the team for doing a good job, but the job is not fully done, as Alex still needs to be transferred, so the team decide to take a SWAT truck, and they successfully deliver Alex to a maximum prison. After that, we see them sitting in the truck heading back home, but they get a call for a robbery. The team's shift has ended, but they still decide to do one more job. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.